Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are tuning in. Thank you so much for joining me today for my next installment of Facebook and Instagram Live. And if you've been following along with these sessions, you know that I give these sessions for about a month or maybe 5 weeks or so as a way of building momentum towards an online meditation program that I'm offering. And this session is no different in that respect. So I want to talk a little bit about the program that I'm offering. And I'm offering two actually, but today I'm speaking primarily to the program entitled Awakened Living. Awakened Living is a year-long immersive online meditation program. And everything throughout the entire year will be offered live. None of the sessions in this whole course are pre-recorded. And for me, I feel that's one aspect of my offerings that sets them apart from so many of the online courses that you'll find today. I'm actually there in the room with everyone, answering questions and interacting with people. So it becomes a very rich, immersive experience. So during the duration of the course, we take a deep dive, a really comprehensive and non-sectarian look at the earliest teachings of the Buddha, one of which I'll read here in a few moments. But the teachings that we will explore include, but are certainly not limited to, the four foundations of mindfulness, which are mindfulness of body, feelings, our hedonic experience, pleasant, neutral, unpleasant, mindfulness of mind and heart, and then mindfulness of what's known in the tradition as dhammas. And so those will include, for our purposes, what's known as the five hindrances. So we get to become intimately connected to the aspects of the human heart which hinder our path to a flourishing life. And in that intimacy, we get to know them very well. And in that knowing, we can put them aside. And when we do put those five hindrances aside, just beyond those hindrances, or as some teachers call them, the veiling factors, just beyond those are the seven factors of awakening. Those factors that are inherent in the human heart that lead us to a more flourishing and happy life. So the Awakened Living course will be offered in 4 semesters, and there's a break in between each semester, roughly anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks. That break is there so that we might integrate the teachings and what's been offered in the course up until that point. So although I'll be drawing primarily on the teachings of the Buddha for the Awakened Living course, there's no religion being taught. People from all walks of life and any belief system are welcome. People with no beliefs are welcome. So please feel free regardless of your religious inclinations. As the course unfolds, we'll be exploring numerous different mindfulness-based practices, systematically cultivating a continuity of mindful awareness. The benefit of a continuity of mindful awareness, it allows us to engage in our life with a deeper sense of curiosity, of kindness, of wisdom, and care. So the Awakened Living course is offered in 2 sections, and that's really done to cater to people all over the world in different time zones. Section A is from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Wednesdays and Saturdays here in Thailand. So if you're in Asia like I am, and you like an earlier start to your day, Section A would be a good option. That equals to 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Tuesdays and Fridays on the East Coast of America, where many of my clients are located. And so you adjust your clocks accordingly and your calendar accordingly. Section B is offered at 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. on Wednesdays and Saturdays. That's here in Thailand. So if you're in Asia and you like to attend the later in the evening section, section B would be for you. That's equivalent to 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. on Wednesdays and Saturdays, East Coast time. So again, you can go to Google and Google any time conversion chart and find your time zone there. Or you could go to my website, suchsweetthunder.org, and in the home page, if you scroll down, there's a link to a world clock, and you can convert your time zone accordingly. So each group session will include guided meditations. There'll be some Q&A and discussion opportunities. I'm also making myself available for one-to-one sessions throughout the duration of the year-long course. No extra charge for that. There's interactive discussions and breakout rooms and so forth. And there's also an option to join a small study group of 3 people that will meet outside of the course. And it's really determined by the participants in that pod to decide when and how you'll meet and so forth. So anyway, that's the Awaken Living course, kind of the cliff notes of it. If you want to find out more, please do go to the website suchsweetthunder.org. I also have a link on my Facebook page. If you click on that link, it'll take you to the details as well. And you can register through the website or just by messaging me. Okay, so let's get into the topic at hand then. So I'd like to start us off with just a brief arriving meditation. We might do this for maybe 7 minutes or so, just as a way of settling in together, getting the heart and mind prepared for learning and engaging. So this can be done with your eyes open or closed, however you feel comfortable. If you do opt to meditate with your eyes open, I would suggest a gaze that's lowered towards the ground, a relaxed, soft gaze. Really, any posture will do. If you think you might fall asleep, I would suggest an upright, wakeful posture, a posture that can support your alertness. Yeah. Okay. So in a few moments, I'll ring the bell. So the invitation here is just to arrive into this present moment. There are many ways of arriving and connecting to the present moment. And for this practice, let's start by noticing the sounds of the present moment. So we're invited here to simply become listeners. What does this present moment sound like? There might be quiet sounds or loud sounds, sounds generated by nature, such as a dog barking nearby or bird songs coming in from outside. There might be a cat playing with a toy in the background, or a conversation unfolding nearby. There might be sounds generated by appliances or electronics, machinery, the occasional car, truck, or motorbike passing by outside, or airplane flying overhead, the gentle hum of a heater or a fan or an air conditioner. So just listening. We don't need to try to make anything happen or force anything, but simply dropping into what's always already unfolding. The experience of hearing. Whatever sounds might be there, pleasant or neutral or unpleasant, they're always present moment experiences. So whenever we notice our thoughts going into the future or the past, ruminating, we can always interrupt that rumination with the experience of sound. And then, perhaps in the next breath or two, the invitation then is to bring awareness to the body. And in particular, gently placing awareness at the forehead and inviting the muscles in the forehead to relax. Perhaps inviting the eyes to soften, letting any tension behind the eyes go. Inviting the cheeks of the face to soften, relax. If it's helpful, you might unhook the jaw and just gently shifting the jaw from side to side, inviting the jaw to soften. Perhaps inviting the shoulders to relax and letting any tension that's held in the shoulders soften and let go. We might ask, is that tension helpful right now? Or might I be able to just let that go for a moment? Maybe bringing that same inquiry to the chest and back, upper torso. Inviting the muscles in the upper torso to soften. It's very common for the human body to carry tension in the upper back and shoulders. And just noticing if that's there. Is it helpful right now to be tense there? Perhaps bringing that same inquiry to the abdomen, another area that's frequently used to carry tension and stress. Is that tension supportive and helpful for this moment? Or might it be better to let that relax? Inviting the lower back to relax and grow soft, rest. And if you'd like, we could bring this exploration to the legs, from the hips to the knees to the ankles. So we might invite the legs to relax and soften, if that feels accessible and like a wise thing to do. Perhaps inquiring, is the tension in the legs supportive in this moment? Or can we let that go? And we could bring that same exploration to the feet, inviting the muscles in the feet to relax and grow soft and rest. So just taking a few moments here to notice the entire body, from the bottom of the feet to the top of the head, from the tips of the fingers to the center of the heart. The sensations are not better than, not worse than, not equal to any other sensations. It's just this present moment experience. And if the mind is wandering, remember that's very normal. We could label that thinking, and returning back to the body. If it feels helpful, you might include the sounds as well, giving us a more open, spacious type of awareness. The sounds, the silence, the sensations of body and breath. And so in a few moments' time, we'll begin to shift away from this guided meditation and back into a conversational space. And I'll cue that by ringing the bell 3 times. I was really tempted just to keep going there. Yeah. And if you do join me on the year-long program, we'll be doing longer meditations, of course. But I did have some things I wanted to offer here verbally, so I think we'll do that. And as a way of getting into that part of today's offering, the talk, I want to read this passage from the text called The Noble Quest from the Buddhist tradition. And maybe I'll just set the setting here of this discourse. It's very short, it's just 2 pages long. And in my very small journal, it's only 2 pages, so it's not a lengthy excerpt or anything like that. But so some of you probably know already the legend of the Buddha, where he had he left his home in the palace. He gave up his princeness, and became homeless. Shaved his head, went out, became a wandering mendicant. Studied quite intensely under 2 very, very adept Brahmin teachers, and mastered what's known as the jhanas. And then he discovered that the jhanas didn't lead him to complete awakening. So he said he took up asceticism. He starved himself for 6 years. It says in the tradition that he only ingested 1 sesame seed, 1 grain of salt, and 1 drop of water for 6 years. And so he really pursued asceticism, really, in a sense, punishing his body to transcend the physical experience that we're in. He decided that's not the way to work. In the text, it says he was very close to death, and he fed himself. He decided to eat, and then he went and sat underneath what we know now as the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya in India. And some traditions say he sat for 1 day, 24 hours. Some traditions say 7 days. But anyway, he sat underneath the Bodhi tree in deep, deep meditation. And he had his awakening experience. He went from being Siddhartha Gautama to the Buddha. The Buddha is a title. It simply means the awakened one. So after the Buddha has this, extraordinary experience of insight underneath the Bodhi tree, he wanders the forest for about 49 days. And during that time, he had, several encounters, which we won't go into, but he also had this insight that I'm about to read. So this is just after his enlightenment and before he started teaching. Upon his awakening, the Buddha says, "This truth that I have reached is deep, hard to see." I'm going to take my glasses off. This truth that I have reached is deep, hard to see, difficult to awaken to, quiet and excellent, not confined by thought, subtle and sensed by the wise. But people love their place. They delight and revel in their place. It will be hard for people who delight and revel in their place to see these truths. The truth of conditionality, of conditioned arising and cause and effect. It is also hard to see this truth, the stilling of inclinations, the relinquishing of biases, the fading away of reactivity, desirelessness, ceasing, nirvana. Were I to teach this truth, others would not understand me, and that would be both tiring and vexing for me. People who are colored with attachment, covered by darkness, will not see what goes against the stream. Subtle, deep, hard to see, and fine. Upon thinking this over, I have inclined to inaction. Oh, I love that. So I love so much of this. It's everything in it is just so powerful for me. So I want to unpack this a little bit. And this short passage will be fundamental to the year-long course that we're entering into in January. First, I want to point out that it's lovely that we're seeing the Buddha's humanity, right? If I were to teach these truths, others would not understand me, and that would be both tiring and vexing for me, right? So he's like, yeah, this is too deep. It's liberating, but I'm not sure how to teach this. Right? So he says, the last line of that passage, upon thinking this over, I have inclined to inaction. Well, luckily for us, and for me definitely, he changed his mind. And he did go forth and start to teach. And in fact, just after that passage, later in the discourse, there's a mythological interaction where Brahman, the Hindu god of creation, appears before Siddhartha. At this point, it is still Siddhartha. Or no, he's the Buddha. He's had his awakening. Appears before the Buddha and says to the Buddha, oh Buddha, you must teach. Please go forth and teach. He says, there are many human beings with very little sand in their eyes. And when they hear your teaching, they will wash the sand from their eyes and they will see clearly these truths. So with that encouragement from the Buddha, from Brahman rather, the Buddha does end up entering into a 45-year-long teaching career and very successful. That's why we're still discussing today. So I love that. Yeah, I think that it's touching to recognize that the Buddha too, he felt the impact of these insights and recognized how tricky it would be to deliver these in a comprehensible way. And if you've ever taught this stuff before, well, for me, I can absolutely relate to that. It's tricky. So there's some doubt there in the Buddha, right? But the Buddha eventually quells that doubt and moves forward to teach. And then I want to talk a little bit about the first few lines here, right? This truth that I have reached is deep, hard to see, difficult to awaken to, quiet and excellent, not confined by thought, beyond thought, right? And so many of these teachings are, we can get a taste and a sense of them when we let go of the logic, right? And really are invited to feel in the body and in the heart what's being presented through words, right? Not confined by verbal thought and sensed by the wise, right? And I want to, kind of bring that off of the pedestal maybe. So when we read that sensed by the wise, we might think that only the wisest of people have even had a hint of, these teachings. But I think what's being offered there is that many people are wise enough to have the intuition of conditionality, cause and effect, which I'll speak to in a moment. Let the airplane pass. And the freedom that lie just beyond the letting go of our biases, right? The relinquishing of our biases, right? The fading away of reactivity. So I think what's being pointed to there is that it's accessible, right? Sensed by the wise, right? And I think many people are wise at times. And in those times we get a hit of the insights that are being spoken to here. Then he says, here's the doubt coming up, right? People love their place. They delight and revel in their place. It will be hard for people who delight and revel in their place to see these truths. So this is really important, right? So here the Buddha is talking to one of the resistances that many people will have, myself and most everyone, right? We delight and revel in our place. So what's our place, right? Well, this is really pointing to, I think anyway, the ways that we define ourselves and then cling to those definitions as if they were permanent and fixed. For example, I might define myself as a Buddhist or agnostic. I might define myself as a Christian or a Catholic or a shaman. I might define myself as a teacher or a student or a brother or a sister. I might define myself as Christopher, right? I might define myself as a cisgendered Caucasian male. I might define myself as educated. I might define myself as a loving cat father, right? And if, as long as we are clinging to those places, we define ourselves in these ways, our eyes are clouded, covered with darkness, right? We can't see that these places are ever changing and fluid, right? They're designations that we might spend some time in and find meaning in, and then we have to let those go, right? And so the more we cling to those places, the more we delight and revel in those places, the more we suffer. The more we suffer, right? It's fine to take joy in being a teacher or a student. It's fine to take joy in being the person you are, recognizing that these are fluid and changing experiences, right? The Buddha says, conditioned arising and cause and effect, right? So conditioned arising is really the concept that if it literally, the Pali words literally translate to, if this is, that is. If this isn't, that isn't. And there's a famous sermon towards the end of the Buddha's life where the Buddha was set up to give a sermon, a talk, and it said there was over 1,000 practitioners there waiting, and this was later in the Buddha's career. And everyone's waiting, it's silent, I imagine in my mind as I'm seeing this, it's hot, summer day in India perhaps. The Buddha would have been raised up on a platform, his attendants next to him, and his principal disciples. And, probably people were waiting. There may have been flies and mosquitoes flying around and, insects buzzing and things like that. The sun's beaming down. And after some time, the Buddha simply holds up a flower. And it said that one of the Buddha's disciples that was near the front, one of his principal disciples, Mahakasyapa, stood up and smiled. And the Buddha said that Mahakasyapa was the only one who understood the silent flower sermon. That the Buddha could see in his smile that he understood that the Buddha wasn't just holding up a flower. He was holding up the universe. And that, Mahakasyapa and the Buddha could both see that in the flower there was the rain, the sun, the clouds, the soil, all of the nutrients that went into the soil, all of the worms that helped bring the nutrients to that soil, all of the bees that went into pollinating all of the flowers nearby that led to the birth of that flower, all of the nutrients that fed the bees, maybe there were bee farmers nearby that had families that they cared for, and their lives were supported by countless other causes and conditions, leading back to the very beginning of time. Not only that, but recognizing that it was the human nervous system of the Buddha and Mahakasyapa and everyone else in attendance able to perceive the colors of the flower, the fragrance of the flower, the beauty of the flower, the majesty of the flower, and all of the causes and conditions that brought all 1,250 practitioners together that day, leading back to the beginning of time. And if any one condition was out of place slightly in that coming together, it would have been completely different. That's conditionality, right? Recognizing that in any given moment, billions and billions of causes and conditions have come together to create that moment. And when we can really hold that view in a consistent way, there's no room for blame, right? Or really frustration or reactivity. This is very freeing in that way. Because we see that it's impossible for one person to be completely to blame for any one given situation. Right? There are so many millions and millions of causes and conditions coming together in every moment. So the Buddha was saying, that if we're attached to our place, those places we consider I or me, that it looks permanent and fixed, right? We lose the fact that, let's say I consider myself a teacher, right? And if I'm really delighting and reveling and clinging to that aspect of my persona, it's denying all of the billions of causes and conditions that allowed me to become that teacher. And even the term teacher, it's deceptive because it's a noun, right? It sounds like a fixed, permanent place, when it might be more accurate to say, I'm a teaching, I'm a process, right? Or I'm not Christopher, I'm Christophering, right? This is a constant state of change that's caught in this designation of a body called Christopher, right? And then he goes on, as if that wasn't enough. He goes on, he says, and hard to see this truth, the stilling of inclinations, the relinquishing of biases, the fading away of reactivity, desirelessness, ceasing, nirvana. And I think, I used to think that those were, several different pointers. But for me, that as the more I meditate on that passage, it feels like one practice, one type of practice unfolding, right? We start by stilling our inclinations, by stilling the trajectory of our mind in the silence of meditation, right? And in that silence, we have the opportunity to give up those biases that we cling to, the views that we tend to think reflect reality. We lose the idea, or we lose we get lost in our views and opinions, and we think they're etched into the fabric of the world. Right? We forget that, it's simply a view or a bias, right? And as we give up our biases, right, we still the inclinations, we start to relinquish our biases and our views. We see them, we still have opinions and views, but we don't see them as being fact any longer. We don't interpret them as the truth of the matter. but we see them as our views and opinions, right? That leads to a fading away of reactivity, because so much of our reactivity, our fight, flight, and freeze responses, is in defense of our opinions and views. We could just turn on the news and see this unfolding in any given moment, right? So that reactivity starts to soften as we start to let go of our opinions and biases. This leads to a type of desirelessness, a ceasing of reactivity, and finally, nirvana. Nirvana, for me, and the way I've come to understand nirvana, it's not some metaphysical location in time and space, but simply the act of living this human life free from reactivity. So that feels like a good place to stop. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. And I sincerely hope you will consider joining me on this year-long program. It's going to be great. We're really going to take a deep dive into all of these teachings and practice bringing them out into our day-to-day life. So it's not something we only contemplate on and meditate with, but something we can bring to our life to allow us to live a more flourishing, creative, and happy life. So for more about the program, again, visit the website suchsweetthunder.org. Hope to see you there, and I'll ring the bell to close us out.